Welcome back to YellowCard Vanguard. I'm your host, Toku from It's Toku TV on Twitch. Throughout the week, I'm streaming Vanguard on my Twitch channel. We'll be building decks, playtesting, and just having a grand old time, so be sure to swing on by. With new clan collection reveals coming out every day, you know what that means. It's time for a new chapter of clan collection cores. I want to preface this video and the entirety of the series by saying that many of these lists are entirely conceptual and surface deep, and will need your own playtesting to fine-tune. But each of these will aim to provide a way of thinking on how to take your new support in Clan Collection 3 and 4 and put it into a working deck. They won't all be optimized, but I believe they will be a good baseline to build off of. Welcome to Clan Collection Cores. Starting off our new series of Clan Collection cores, we've got Nebula Lord Dragon and friends to support the Link Joker Star Vader variant. Link Joker throughout V Premium has a trichotomy between Deleters, Messiahs, and Star Vaders, and Brant if you count that. And this new support is for Star Vaders, again. The archetype that looks to control your opponent's board by locking circles and not allowing your opponent to play the game. Let's see how Nebula Lord Dragon and friends helps out this subclan. The new grade 3 we have is Star Vader Nebula Lord Dragon. Its first skill is an axe skill on the Van Circle, has a cost of Soul Blast 1, and retire a Star Vader named Rearguard. Then, your opponent locks one of their own rearguards. Then, if your opponent has no rearguards in the back row, Nebula Lord Dragon gains a drive. If your opponent did not lock, in essence, has no rearguards or has a resist unit, your opponent looks at the top card of their deck and calls it to an empty rearguard circle as locked. Its second skill says, during your turn, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, for each of your opponent's locked cards, all your Star Vader named units gain 5k. Let's quickly talk about Nebula Lord Dragon. It does have a major flaw, and that is the ability of your opponent to deny that extra drive check by easily just having something in the back row or to easily have something with resist. So to get that extra drive, you have to finagle your way through a lot of different lock mechanics, in example Zirconium and Palladium, to get to that extra drive. Its second skill requires your opponent to be grade 3, so we're unable to go first and ride Nebula to lock something and give the board an extra 5k or 10k for that early aggro push. That being said, I think Nebula Lord Dragon is a good inclusion to help Chaos Breaker Dragon decks close out games by giving your board a sizable amount of power after shredding and attacking at their resources through the use of Chaos Breaker Dragon itself. The new grade 2 Star Vader is Unrivaled Star Vader Radon. Two abilities to talk about here. Its first activates in the drop zone. At the beginning of your battle phase, you can Soul Blast 1 to call this to the same column as the Star Vader Rearguard. If you had 1 or less soul, this cost is then reduced by Soul Blast 1. Effectively costless once you reach the Soul Crunch, which is a problem that Star Vaders have. Its second skill, on the Rearguard, activates on attack. It makes it for the battle that it attacked, your opponent has to guard with 2 or more cards at the same time. Then at the end of the battle, you bind this unit. Do make note that this is mandatory. Its second skill being mandatory is a major flaw in this card and leaves it very much wanting more. Because it is mandatory, you are unable to rush at all with this card and still have a body on board. I will mention though that I can appreciate that when you find yourself in a crunch and lacking rearguards to attack with, having a pair of Radons in drop does fill up the board quite nice, and in combination with the power boost that Nebula gives, the guard restriction might come up huge. Until the late game though, I think Radon is only ever going to be used as retire cost for Nebula, discard fodder for Colony Maker, and it's also, unironically, it's also one of the best Rise since you can Soul Blast it as well. The new grade 1 is Mana Shot Star Vader Neon. Similarly to Radon, it has an effect that activates in the drop zone at the beginning of your battle phase. You can counterblast 1 to call this in the same column as your opponent's locked card. Its second skill states that at the end of your opponent's turn, if your opponent's locked card was not unlocked this turn, unbind this unit. Basically, this happens when your opponent gets Omega locked or when your opponent doesn't have anything that is locked. The first thing to mention is the fact that it's very hard to fight for grade 1 slots in Star Vaders. Since Craven Claw and Palladium exist, and they are really good Star Vader names as well, which are also grade 1, it leaves Neon fighting for Lady Battler's slot. And truth be told, I don't think Neon is better than any of these 3 grade 1s at the moment, so I opted to not include it in this list myself. If you do find a way, however, to fit Neon in, do let me know in the comments because I am very curious myself. With all the new cards introduced, let's take a look at my list and explain the game plan. As always, for any Star Vader deck, the game plan is to grind your opponent to a pulp through Chaos Breaker Dragon's lock mechanic and gift stealing ability to start gaining your own force markers and buffing our own units. Once we've effectively put our opponent through the juicer, we look to rewrite into Nebula Lord Dragon and close out the game with our very large board from stealing force markers and the global power that Nebula Lord gives thanks to our opponent's locked cards. Our endgame board will generally look like all Star Vader unit names, Zirconium on the board to give our Vanguard a base grade of 2, and any Star Vader rearguard attackers, and unironically, Chaos Breaker Dragon makes for a fearsome rearguard attacker himself, being a base 23k attacker, so long as our opponent has a locked rearguard, and a Nebula Lord Dragon can then buff him some more. As such, we're running a full playset of Chaos Breaker Dragon, our first grade 3 ride and also one of our stronger rearguards, a full playset of Nebula Lord Dragon, and a full playset of Bisection on Star Vader Zirconium. That's 12 slots done. I definitely also need to mention the best card in all of Star Vaders is the grade 1 Star Vader Craven Claw. Being able to have a permanent venue of on-hit pressure that also lets you dig for your important Star Vader name pieces is great. In theory, because Craven Claw is our best card, I want to ensure its value, and I opted to run 4 copies of any other good Star Vader names in Colony Maker and Palladium. I opted only to run 3 copies of Radon because, as stated before, Radon in the early game and mid game is just a card we can retire off for Nebula Lord, a card to discard for Colony Maker, and doesn't really come up until the end game when we do need that extra attacker. That leaves us with 6 slots in the main deck, which we can use for tech cards. I've opted to run 2 copies of Nordstrom Dragon as a method of countercharge. Since Chaos Breaker Dragon, Zirconium, and Palladium, we do have 3 methods of counterblast. The last 4 slots go to a playset of Lady Battler of the White Dwarf. Just a generically good card to be able to find our Chaos Breakers, our Nebula Lords, our Nordstroms, heal Guardians against the aggro matchups. Lady Battler also has a very easy condition to hit for that 5k boost. She'll often be a 13k body on the board as well. Going into our trigger lineup, we've opted to run 4 Heal Guardians for the safety in early game, but also to provide us a counterblast going first if we can. We run the Draw Sentinel and 8 criticals to give our rearguards that extra bit of push needed to close out games once we rewrite into Nebula Lord. There's a few other ways that you can take the new support, and you can also go back to the first clan collection and play Infinite Zero Dragon as well. Think if you also feel that despite having the Star Vader name, Radon and Colony Maker just aren't good enough to make the cut, you can also look towards Gravity Collapse Dragon to threaten that incredibly high pressure grade 2 turn. Gravity Collapse Dragon boosted by a Craven Claw is a good way to rip out a lot of cards from your opponent's hand early. On the other hand of things, perhaps you appreciate the fact that Neon is in fact the Star Vader name that will stay on the board in comparison to Palladium and Craven Claw, which do have venues of disappearing. So you might run Neon over Lady Battler for that extra 4 Star Vader names, and opens up the play that you can fill up a column going into the battle phase by calling Neon and then Radon from draw. Who knows, the world is your oyster. In closing, Star Vader unfortunately will not change too much from its core game plan of locking and resource denial, and all the new support allows you is to branch out into different variations of the same game plan. I do think, however, that Nebula Lord is a very good auxiliary grade 3 for the deck though, if not for the full board buff to close out said games. Unfortunately, despite all the new Star Vader names being introduced again, I don't think any of these are big boons to the decks and probably will not shake up the meta at all one bit. But you can take solace in the fact that the introduction of Nebula Lord Dragon might be the endgame push that Star Vader needed. In any case, this has been it from me for this episode of Clan Collection Cores. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this, like the video as it helps motivate us to keep the gears going, and leave a comment down below. Every little bit helps the channel. This has been Togo from YellowCard Vanguard. Togo out.